And shortly after I moved back in, it was right back to the same behaviors. So he ended up rupturing a disc in my back, my lower back, my L5S1. And I had to go, I couldn't walk anymore. And the first doctor that saw me told me I would never walk again. I was 31 years old. And I had just had a baby with him. And we had a little baby daughter. So I had this little cute little redheaded 1-month-old baby daughter, and he ruptured my back.
Barbara, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very excited to hear your story, but you are also a founder of the IANDS group in Santa Barbara, the largest
Yes.
group in America. So I'm going to ask you a little bit about that as well. But for our viewers, before we even go into that, can you just give us a little bit of background about what an NDE actually is?
Yes. Well, according to the IANDS website, which is an international organization that deals with near-death experiences, both research and support of people who've had them, a near-death experience is a profound psychological event that may occur to a person that's close to death or dead, or if not near dead or near death, in a situation of physical or emotional crisis. Because it includes transcendental and mystical elements, an NDE is a powerful event of consciousness. It is not mental illness or hallucination. They often turn to alternative healthcare treatments. They sometimes have an electrical sensitivity, and they have increased allergies or sensitivities, and they can possess the ability to heal. They have a preference for more vegetables in their life and less grains and less meat. And they're physically younger looking. So when you see me, I'm 68 years old and I still have my own red hair, and I have 20/20 vision, and I have perfect hearing. So I'm really proud and glad that I had my near-death experience, because it contributed so much to my life. It's been the most amazing thing that I could ever have asked for, and I never asked for it, and I never knew it even existed when I had my NDE, but the after effects are absolutely awesome in my life.
Wow. Well, one has to go to extremes if one wants to stay young.
Yeah, really. So do you want me to tell you a little bit about what happened in my NDE?
I would love to, but before we do that, why do some of them have depression? Is it because they came back? Is it because they're struggling to integrate? Because I've heard that a lot.
Absolutely. Those two reasons, absolutely. Yes. Many of the people, and in my situation too, I wanted to come back, but many of them actually feel such incredible and intense love, acceptance, the connection that they have there that they don't have here in the world. They don't want to come back. And when they're told that you have more to do, more to learn, more to contribute to the world, they're sent back, and they're not happy about that in the long run. That's a really depressing thing for them, to be sent back, sometimes remembering what their purpose is that they need to do, like I had, or sometimes forgetting it and not knowing what their future. And then of course, because they're so different, they often have divorces because their loved ones don't accept the new person and don't understand the aspects of the new person. So it's really hard for some people to have a near-death experience and then experience what happens when they come back.
Yeah. So if we choose as a soul to incarnate, then, and you go to the other side, why are they sent back? Surely they should know. You know what I mean? like you're sent back there, and they say, but you chose that. Do they tell them that at the same time? You chose to be incarnated, so you didn't finish your job, so we're sending you back because that's what you wanted.
They could say that to some people. They didn't say that to me, of course. I was asking to go back. But I don't, I think that there are amazing stories out there in the NDE world that you can find, that like Dr. Mary Neal is a doctor, and she had a kayaking accident, and she was sitting on a stone in a meadow with Jesus. That's who she strongly believed in. And he ended up telling her that she needed to go back, and she didn't want to go back. But he told her that her husband was going to have, who was also a doctor, was going to have a medical situation that if she wasn't there, he was going to die, and the children would be left without parents.
Okay.
And 4 children at the time. And then she was told that her son, youngest son, Willie, was going to have a bad situation occur when he was 18 years old. It actually happened when he was 19, but she was told that he was going to die, and that if she did not go back, the way that he died was going to cause what happened to him was that he was hit by a distracted driver. A young female was looking at her phone and hit him while he was roller skiing up in Utah, Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And so he was hit and killed. And so Mary was told by Jesus that if she wasn't there to support this young woman through the situation and keep the community from basically attacking this young woman for killing her son, that the young woman's life would be terribly affected. And so Mary went back, and her son did die. Her husband did have his medical issue. Mary saved her husband's life by getting him the resources he needed. And then after her son died, she ended up helping this young woman who wasn't a bad young woman. She had just made a mistake. And her son, Mary's son, had been up at the top of the hill overlooking Jackson Hole, Wyoming, before he was hit, moments before he was hit. And he was talking to a young woman who was also on the ski team with him. And he mentioned to her that he had had the most beautiful life, and that he had been blessed with such an amazing family and all these experiences, and that if he were to die that day, that the beauty of the valley in front of him and the life that he had lived was so precious to him that he wouldn't be sad about that. And just moments later, when they were going down from that hill, he was hit, and the girl was not hit. So she was alive to tell Mary what he had said up there at the top of the hill, which helped Mary completely, because that, of course, told her that he realized that his life was going to end that day. And he had done that once when he was 5 years old. He had been doing something dangerous that Mary thought, he shouldn't do. And Mary said, "Stop that. Don't you realize that you could die by doing that?" And he looked at her at 5 years old and said, "Don't you remember? I'm not going to die until I'm 18.
Oh.
And at the time, she wanted to forget that he said that, and he didn't have the spiritual aspects that she gained through her near-death experience later on in life. And, it was very shocking to her, but she remembered it after he had died, that he had said that. And so she knew that he knew his life. He knew when he was coming. He knew when he was going. And, that was very powerful for Mary. She's written a couple of books. Definitely check those out. Dr. Mary Neal, Neal.
Wow. Well, I suppose it's not just about you. It's about all the other, the ripple effect of you being out of the picture and how it affects other people's lives.
Exactly. Yes. How does your family and how do you people in your life and your loved ones and family members and friends go through the situation? What do you miss doing here? Like, I have purpose. I had a purpose to open this IANDS organization here in Santa Barbara. And it's, not the largest in the United States or the world, but it is the largest on the West Coast of the United States. And, we have a monthly meeting that people come to that haven't had near-death experiences. And the whole audience is filled. And I have experiencers that come from all over. And they, once a month, I have an experiencer tell their story. And people have told me a million times through the podcasts that I've done with my near-death experience, the NBC Today show that I appeared on, U.S. News and World Report did an amazing article on me years ago and validated with doctors that I had a near-death experience. And all of those people that are touched by our experiences, our NDEs, they end up losing their fear of death. They end up living their life in a different way, a more positive way, thinking how they can contribute to others, finding love that they can give to other people as well as help. And it's a complete change to the people's lives that study near-death experiences, that listen to them, that have them. It's planted, I think, to help people and this world to change what our outlook and what our future is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, it's like the veil's been lifted, and I'm surprised at the number of people that are actually experiencing that, because they've kept it so well hidden. The first near-death experience I read about, I think I was maybe in the 1990s, I read a book on that. And I was fascinated because no one talked about that. No one, my family thought I was a bit crazy to even think that there could be such a thing, that you could live after you died. And now there's so many people speaking out.
Yes.
But I think there's a reason why they're coming back more than ever now too.
Yes. Yeah. It took a long time. My NDE was in 1987, but, all of the NDEs weren't spoken about. And this went all the way back to the Greek times, because there was a soldier that had a near-death experience and came back, and it was all documented. And, it's in history. It's been happening for centuries, but no one talked about it because everybody thought it was negative or woo-woo or, against the religions. And it isn't. It's above the religions. It's way more educational, and the understanding of it helps your life so much. Even if you haven't had one, they've done research on that even if you haven't had one and you read them and you listen to them, it helps you so much in guiding your life into a positive way that you will, at the end of your life, see how you affected so many people and touched their lives in positive ways. And that NDE helps you towards that. And learning about them helps you towards that. When we think only of ourselves and money and ego and power, those are the people that need the NDEs the most, because those are the ones that need to have change in their life. And I really hope the world has way more near-death experiences that are talked about, that are shared, that are taught. And I know and I see that happening because here in my Santa Barbara, the hospital, Cottage Hospital, asked me to do what's called a grand rounds talk in front of 60 doctors and 40 nurses to talk about my near-death experience, so I can teach. And I really hope, everything that's out there, the IANDS organization and their website, the NDERF organization, which I'll give you the information on that in a little bit, but all of those are there's lots of NDEs on YouTube. I mean, everybody can see these now. And back in 1987, when I had mine, I had never even heard of the term near-death experience, and I had no idea what had happened to me. So it's beautiful that it's expanding, and I think it's changing our world. I do.
And I also think at that time, for you to speak out about it, people would have said, you're talking rubbish. We don't want to hear what you have to say.
Exactly.
You're making it up. That we don't want to know.
Exactly. I am absolutely certain of that. Yeah. I haven't really had anybody since I came out of my near-death, in my closed box of not talking about it. I haven't had anybody. Maybe online on YouTube, there might be comments that people don't believe. But my whole feeling on that is I'm sending out and planting that seed in them that this is real, that this happened to me, that it's happened to thousands and thousands and thousands and millions of other people. And that hopefully they'll at some point have something that plants in their life that they think back to those NDEs that they did here, and they all of a sudden realize that it is the truth. And that helps them in some way. So I feel that my NDE is a positive gift that I'm supposed to give out to the world. When I was in my NDE, that's what I was told was my purpose. Yeah. So I was up on the ceiling above my body. That's what I found was I was told that I was supposed to talk about this. And so it took me a long time. It took me 12 years. And I didn't have anybody else that had ever had an NDE around me. So I didn't know. I didn't even know it was called an NDE. So it took some time, and I saw how the other side, whatever you call beyond the curtain, planted things to happen in my life that energized me in my capacity to talk about it, because I was scared at first, and I didn't want to have anybody think I was weird, and I had children, and I didn't want to talk about it. But it ended up that things opened up slowly, and things were planted in my life that were achievements that in my community here in Santa Barbara, I'm well respected, and my NDE is well respected. And so then it branched out, and I started, giving the NDE out to the world, because I was believed and I was respected here in Santa Barbara. So that helped a lot. Yeah.
Well, you cannot deny the positive changes that have happened afterwards from people. And there's just too many for it to have been made up. Like, no one has a mental illness and gets better.
Right. And the background that I have is that back when I first came to Santa Barbara 42 years ago, I worked for a company that had to do with missiles and missile systems and the lunar rover, landing rover thing. And so it was real tech, and I had to have a whole background check by the Department of Defense. The U.S. Department of Defense had to check my entire background before I could be allowed to work in my position. And my background is that my mother, when I was about 13 years old, became a sheriff, a deputy sheriff in Salem, Oregon, where I grew up. And she was very, very structured and powerful woman. And you did not do anything that you thought she was going to get mad at, because you did not want to have that problem on your hands. So I never drank alcohol. I never did drugs, never smoked marijuana, never stole anything, never did anything that was going to get me in trouble with my mom. So when the Department of Defense did this background clearance, of course, they found this completely clean background on me, and then worked at that company for a few years. Ended up, part of my story about my NDE is the intuition that the other side puts into you to tell you what to do next. And I ended up having a business here in Santa Barbara that I was told to have by the other side. And right after I opened that business, I was named Businesswoman of the Year for Santa Barbara, California. And this is where Oprah lives and where a lot of the Hollywood stars live. And it's a very expensive area. And, to be named 3 months after I open a business that I'm told to open that I don't even have any in, named Businesswoman of the Year. I also now work for the police department in Santa Barbara, California. I'm a volunteer. There are 10 men and myself, and were called Volunteers in Policing. So they did a background check on me as well, which they found completely clean. And I actually am badged and uniformed, and I am out in the community helping the police department. And now that I'm retired from the University of California, Santa Barbara, where I spent my years working for the Graduate School of Education. So I see these different things that I have done that kind of contributed to who I was and my valuable background that allows me to feel comfortable talking about my near-death experience now. And it also makes other people, when they find out about it, okay, she's not just some floozy that's just, talking about an NDE and making it up. I'm not. This is the truth. It happened to me. I have all of the honesty that I could possibly give to everyone, that this is real and it happened, and it was absolutely beautiful in my life. I guess I should talk about it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what happened now.
Okay.
I'm sure everyone watching is dying to hear.
When I was 31 and I had moved to Santa Barbara, the person that had asked me to move down here from Oregon asked me to marry him if I came down to Santa Barbara, and he had a home here, and he had been working up in Oregon on a temporary position up there. And so I had been married previously, and I had a little son who was about 4 or 5 years old at that time. And I thought that this was going to be a great idea, that, wow, Santa Barbara, California, and this is going to be amazing. So the person was nice to me and everything was good. So I moved down here and I married him. And about 3 months after the marriage, I started to see the real him. And he was very controlling, and he was very manipulative. He would control and manipulate me. And I was way far away from my family, of course, and I knew nobody down here other than him. And he isolated me, and he hurt me a lot. So he would punch me, kick me, push me up against the wall, hold his hand up to my throat and make me not be able to breathe sometimes. Everything that he could do that hurt me whenever I did anything, like as simple as I'm not supposed to put my coffee cup, I don't drink coffee, but I'm just making it up, on the table without having something underneath it. Well, if I forgot and I did something that he had told me not to do, then he would hit me or push me or shove me or kick me. And, it was really traumatic. And I was very scared of him. And I ended up leaving him for a year and telling him I had already asked him to go to a marriage family counselor. And he, after three or four sessions, rejected that idea and wouldn't go anymore. I took him to a church that I knew a pastor at, and he tried to help, and he rejected that too. The husband rejected that too. And then I wrote him a 9-page letter and said, if you ever hit me again, I'm going to leave you. I'm not gonna live my life being hurt like this. And he, would always apologize after he did the blow up, but he would do it again 3 months, 3 weeks later, who knows, whenever it triggered for him. So I moved out from him, and I lived in an apartment for a year with my son, and he was about 7 years old at that time. And then I told the husband that if he got counseling and he solved his problem with his abuse situation, that I would consider moving back in. Well, he again lied to me, lured me back in, told me everything was going to be wonderful. We were going to have a lovely life together. And shortly after I moved back in, it was right back to the same behaviors. So he ended up rupturing a disc in my back, my lower back, my L5-S1. And I had to go, I couldn't walk anymore. And the first doctor that saw me told me I would never walk again. I was 31 years old. And I had just had a baby with him, and we had a little baby daughter. So I had this little cute little redheaded 1-month-old baby daughter, and he ruptured my back. So the second doctor that I went and saw told me that he could fix it. And the first doctor had said, "You're never going to walk again." So I scheduled surgery with that doctor, and he was a neurosurgeon, and he got an orthopedic surgeon on board to do the surgery with him. And they were going to do a laminectomy, discectomy. And that was fixing the area that had blown out, ruptured, and getting all the fragments of the disc out of my body. And then they wanted to check to see if the fragments had chipped my spinal cord when they blew out, because I wasn't walking. And that would have been a bigger surgery, and they would have needed to fix my spinal cord too. So the night before the surgery, they had me come into the hospital, and they did what's called a myelogram. And that's injecting iodine dye into my spinal cord right at the back of my neck and numbing it first, but I was completely alert and awake. There was no other things going on with me. And they numbed the area, and they injected the dye into my spinal cord, and they had me on an x-ray table, and they told me, "You have to hold completely still during this whole procedure. Otherwise, you could have headaches, severe headaches for months afterwards." So I laid on the table. The two neurosurgeon and an orthopedic surgeon were in the room. They were against a wall over behind the two x-ray techs that were right by the table. And there was a nurse in the room over at another desk by the door of the room. And she was doing paperwork. And they had injected the dye in, and they told me to hold still. And the x-ray tech next to the table pushed a button on the table to supposedly raise my head and lower my feet. Unfortunately, he was pushing the wrong button on the table, but he immediately, not paying attention to what he was doing or the table, started talking to the other x-ray tech that was at the head of the table with a monitor, computer monitor in front of him, and he was going to be watching the dye as it went down my spine, because the x-ray table was up above me and would be getting that information over to the monitor that he was seeing. So the two of them were talking to each other about fun stuff, not anything medical. And I started feeling immediately when he started pushing the table, and it was kind of going, the table was, and it was going really slowly. And I started feeling funny. And I thought, oh, wow, am I supposed to be feeling like this? I kind of feel like I'm going to faint. And because they were talking and I couldn't see the two doctors and the nurse was clear across the room, I didn't say anything. I just laid there. And I thought, oh, I feel so bad. I feel weird. I don't know what, I'm going to faint or something. Something's wrong. And by the time I realized I need to interrupt them and I need them to focus on me, I couldn't talk. I couldn't actually open my mouth and speak anything. And I couldn't reach my hand out to get their attention. So it was about a minute after they had started moving the table. And in the next 30 seconds, my eyes started rolling to the back of my head, so I couldn't keep my vision forward. They were rolling backwards. And then the last thing I did was start hyperventilating. I was going like that. And that's what made them stop talking to each other. And then they turned and looked at me, and the x-ray tech with his finger on the button leaned over my body and my face. And then he leaned back to see where his thumb was on the machine. And right then he made this face like, and that was the last thing I saw. My eyes shut in my body. And the next second, I was up on the ceiling above my body, looking down at my body in the whole room. It felt like there was a ceiling against like the back of my head, but of course I didn't have a head or a body up there. It felt like it hit a barrier. And I was looking straight down. I could hear and see everything. And I was very calm up there. I wasn't feeling panicked like I had been in my body. And I looked down and calmly said, if I'm up here and my body's down there and they're calling code blue, because the x-ray tech had started calling code blue, which means dead, the person is dead, the heart has stopped, then I think that I'm dead. And so right when I said that, there was a feeling of a presence right to the left of my body. And it felt really loving and accepting. I felt like I had been wrapped into a warm blanket of love and acceptance, and it just felt amazing. And I immediately started saying to the being in my train of thought, I really need to go back into my life. If I leave my children in this way at this time, they'll be abused and they won't grow up to be the good human beings that they're capable of being. I need to go back to protect them. Please let me go back, please. So the being didn't speak to me right then, and everything was going on down below. They'd called in for an oxygen cart to come in. So the 2 x-ray techs had been doing CPR on me. One of them was doing chest compressions on my chest. The other one was blowing into my mouth oxygen. And then when the oxygen cart came in, then they put the oxygen mask on my face. And then they both switched off every 2 minutes or so doing chest compressions, because one person would get tired of doing it. Then the other person would come in and he would do it for 2 minutes. I was watching it all from above, calm as could be. And the this other person came into the room, and the doctors were yelling out orders to everybody, and put it on this shelf that was on the wall, this ledge, and he started peeling off these white things and putting them onto my chest. I had never seen a heart monitor. I did not know what it was. And up on the ceiling, I had said maybe 2 or 3 times by then how much I wanted to go back into my life. And then I said to the being, I understand everything everyone else is doing in the room to resuscitate me, but I don't understand what that box is. What is that? And I was moved down in front of the box so that it was right in front of my vision of my consciousness. And there was a green glass window at the top of it and a lot of dials and switches and stuff. And there was a toggle switch on the side of it. And I watched as the man who had brought it in had finished putting the circles on me. And his hand went in front of my face like this. And he used the little toggle switch to turn the box on. And there was a little white light in the long green screen, and it started moving across the screen in a straight line. I didn't know what it was. And it was making this monotone sound going beep. Well, after it hit the end of the long box, it started again, and it started going across the screen again. And then I still didn't know what it was. And the third time it started to go across, about a third of the way over, I don't know how I got the information, but I realized, oh, it's supposed to be going up and down. That's my heart. It's not beating. And the second I thought that, I was moved back up on the ceiling again next to the being. And I again said, I really want to go back into my life. Please, I need to help my children. So right about that time, the neurosurgeon said to the orthopedic surgeon, too much time has passed. She's going to be brain dead. We need to do something. And the orthopedic surgeon said, stand clear. And everybody backed away from the table. And he stepped 2 steps forwards, took his fist from behind his back and pounded it right in my center of my chest. I watched my body respond to that. I was up above still, and I watched it kind of jerk because he'd hit me so hard, but I didn't go back into it. And up on the ceiling, right when that happened, the being finally spoke to me. And this beautiful voice said, but if you go back, you'll still be in your marriage. What will you do? And then showed me these film clips that just went flash, 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 flash. All these little films of all the damage that my husband had been doing, the hitting, kidding, pushing, shoving, kicking, all the things were shown. I'd been trying to forgive him, get him to change, forget the things that he'd done and try to forgive him. But that being wanted me to remember that. So he showed me all those experiences and then gave me the time to think about what my answer would be. So I thought about all the things that I had done to try to help him change, my husband change. Nothing had ever worked. And I came to the realization that it wasn't him that could change. I needed to change. So I said to the being, if you let me go back, I promise you, I'll get strong enough to leave him. And the second that I said that, that same orthopedic surgeon did another strike to my chest, and my eyes shut up above, and I opened my eyes, and I had the oxygen mask on my face. I was back in my body. And he was only, arm's length away from me. So I looked at him and I said into the oxygen mask, what just happened? And the nurse leaned over me and said, stop, don't talk. We need to stabilize you. And so for 20 minutes, they did whatever they had to do to stabilize me. And then they took the oxygen mask off. And I said, what just happened? I was up on the ceiling and I could see and hear everything. And the neurosurgeon, he went, oh, brother. And then that made me completely recount what had just happened because I wanted to be believed. I just had an experience I'd never heard of. And so I said, she was on the phone over there calling for the defib unit and saying stat a lot. And that lady came in with the oxygen card. But before that, these two guys were doing chest compressions and blowing in my mouth. And then, he said to you, too much time had passed and I was going to be brain dead. And you hit me twice on the chest. And then I came back. Well, that freaked the neurosurgeon out massively. And he clenched his hands up next to his body and had this face like this. And he went, I'm not going to stand here and listen to this. And he stormed out of the room. But then the orthopedic surgeon took my hand and said, tell me, what did it feel like? Tell me again what you saw. How did you feel when you were feeling this? What was it like? And he was very interested in everybody else in the room stood there and listened to the whole thing. Then they put me on a gurney and they sent me up to my room because I was having surgery the next morning, and no one at the hospital would talk to me and answer any question about it because, of course, it had been a medical error and they were afraid of lawsuit. So the next morning I got shipped down to the surgical area and they did the laminectomy, discectomy on my back. And when I was in the recovery area, the two doctors were walking towards me. And I said, what happened last night during my myelogram? What happened? And the neurosurgeon put his hand out like this and said, I am not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about your surgery. So when my then husband came later that afternoon to the hospital and I told him what happened, he said, oh, that couldn't have happened. You probably hallucinated that. Well, I knew I had never done drugs, never had alcohol, never did things, never had any hallucinations. I was solid. I was straight. There wasn't any hallucination there, and I knew it. So I just took that story that had happened to me and I put it inside myself and I cherished it, but I never told anybody about it for like 12 years. I ended up getting away from the husband. I ended up safely getting away from the husband, which was big deal for me. And my two children lived with me. We had an apartment. And one of the things that the near-death experience does is it gives you this connection to the other side. So I ended up finding this sweet apartment. I had gone to 4 different apartment managers and they had declined because I didn't have any money, because my husband had taken my whole entire salary every month and I had no money. So I had to ask an apartment manager to wait, until I could pay him when I got my salary directly from my employer, because he was going to keep all my money. And so I needed to have somebody who would believe me. And finally, the 5th person that I saw the day that I was looking for an apartment just was the kindest person. And actually, you're going to love this. He had grown up in the Netherlands. He was about 60 years old. He told me that during World War II, he was a child. And he said that his parents had Jewish people knock on their door many, many times running from Germany. And they needed a coat, or they needed a blanket, or they needed a place to sleep overnight, or they needed food. And he said, my parents every single time helped everyone that knocked on my door, on our door. And he said, today, when you told me about what your situation was, I see the same face that those Jewish people had of you running in fear from something. She said, you can move into the apartment. Yes, you can move in. And he trusted me. I became friends with him. He was the nicest man. And my husband that I ended up marrying lived only a block away, and my child and his child became friends, and they got us together on a date with the two children. And I ended up getting married 2 years after the divorce and after the near-death experience. And I married the nicest guy. And guess what? He'd been in the Netherlands for 5 years playing basketball in Leiden and Zandvoort. The Netherlands is a very special place to me and to my husband and to my family. So I want to tell you, I love you guys. So it ended up that, I came out of my shell because of a nurse at the hospital. She was a friend of mine, and her mom was dying, and I realized that my near-death experience story might help her in her impending grief over her mom's death. And so I told her what happened, and she was the first person other than my husband that I'm married to. I told him, and he believed me completely. So I knew I'd gotten the right guy, but I told this nurse, and she said, Barbara, that's called a near-death experience. There's a lot of information online. We nurses see that happen all the time. She said, it's real. Check it out. So I ended up finding out information about it, and I ended up going to a big conference that the IANDS organization, which IANDS stands in, it's an international organization. They have groups, I think, in Amsterdam, but you can look online on their website, and it's International Association for Near-Death Studies. So it's IANDS.org is their website. And they have part of their website shows where their groups are all over the world. And they also have online groups that you can become a part of, that you don't even have to live near a physical group like mine. You can do an online group and be still connected with people who have had near-death experiences, as well as those people who want to learn more about them. So it's an amazing organization. But I feel that, all of the planting of the things that happened in my life to get me to where I am right now is just beautiful. And I feel that the door is open to the other side, and I feel happy that I understand what I do. And there's been so many times that my husband is just shocked at what happens when things unfold, and he, can't believe what just happened. One of those is an experience where we were driving back from San Francisco to Santa Barbara, and it's about a 5.5 hour drive. And it was about 9:30 at night. We were about a half an hour north of Santa Barbara, and it's along the coastline, and it's very windy. It's called Gaviota. And we came along that area, and the wind was blowing really hard, and we were in our van, our Toyota van, and the gusts of wind were kind of, rocking the van, and it was pretty big. And all of a sudden, this big gust of wind hit the van, and I watched as my husband was struggling to keep the van under control, holding onto the steering wheel, and his hands were just shaking. He was just, with all of his might, trying to keep the car under control. And so after it kind of stopped, and the wind was just gusting again, not the big gust of wind, I said, I don't think we should do 65 miles an hour. I think we should do 50. Let's slow down. And he said, yeah, I think so too. So he slowed down to 50, and I thought we were safe. I felt okay then. We were doing slower speed. We're on a freeway. Interestingly, about 5 minutes later, this voice in my ear whispers, danger, big impact ahead, danger, big impact. And I just went, oh my God. And so I turned to my husband and I said, you know how I sometimes hear from the other side? And he said, yes. And I said, I just heard this. And I repeated what the voice had said. And I said, so I think we should slow down again. Instead of doing 50, I think we should do 30 miles an hour, because we're going to need to be able to have stopping time so we don't hit whatever it is. I don't know if it's a tree that's blown over or if it's a car that's gone out of control, but something up there is a danger for us to hit. So we need to slow down more. Let's do 30 miles an hour. And he goes, Barbara, we're on the freeway. We can't do 30. The speed limit's 65. We can't do 30. And so then I looked through the back of our van and I looked in front of us and I looked at him and I said, Victor, there's no one behind us, no car lights, nobody in front of us. No one is going to care if we're doing 30 miles an hour. If you see somebody catching up to us and you feel like you need to speed up a little bit until they pass us, go ahead. But we need stopping time. So do 30 as long as we can. So he goes, okay, I guess I can do that. So he slowed down to 30 miles an hour. For about 10 minutes, we were traveling at 30 miles an hour and no cars. This is a very frequented highway coming into Santa Barbara, and everybody from the north uses this highway. It's usually, lots of people. So it was weird that nobody was there. What we didn't know was that the California Highway Patrol, the police, had closed the freeway behind us, and we were in between the closure and what was way up ahead, the reason why they closed it. So we're traveling along and we go around a corner, and way up in the distance in the dark, I see a single police car's lights. That was the only one I saw in this whole situation. And I knew right then that that was where the danger was. So I was intently looking, trying to see through the dark, like, what is the danger? What is the danger? And as we came up behind the police car in the slow lane, there's only a fast lane and a slow lane next to each other. And we were coming up in the slow lane. The one thing that we saw was that the police car hadn't parked off of the freeway and, was keeping both lanes open. He had stopped his car in the slow lane and he was blocking it. So we were going to have to change lanes to the fast lane to go around him. So about 50 yards, about a football field, half of a football field, behind the police car, Victor started to change lanes. When he did, someone from the other side, this was the most freaky moment, grabbed both of my upper arms. I felt clenching hands on my upper arms. I saw the shimmer of a face in front of my face, right up close to it. And I heard 10 miles an hour screamed really loud. So I was freaked out and I echoed what the 10 miles an hour, I echoed it and said it to Victor. And I screamed 10 miles an hour really loud. So he had just changed lanes into the fast lane and the cop car was up ahead, and he slowed down between where we were right then and the cop car. So he was doing 10 miles an hour right when he went by the cop car. Still, we didn't know what the situation was, but we got about maybe 5 car lengths past the cop car, and our lights finally lit up the bottom, dirty bottom of a semi-truck that had turned over on its side, and the bottom was all dirty with no reflectors, and the cab of the truck where the truck driver would be and where the gas tanks were was right in front of us, and we were going to end up hitting it if we stayed in the lane. And the rest of the truck was blocking the slow lane and off the side of the highway, so there was nothing to do but go to the left of the front of the truck and go off the highway and go around the front of the truck. And because we were doing 10 miles an hour, we were able to do that. And when I got on the far side of the truck, I looked up and there was the police officer standing up on top of the truck, braced against the wind, talking to the trapped truck driver who was inside. And he was shocked to see a car because he knew that the police had closed the freeway and didn't think any cars were going to come. So my husband didn't know that I saw him, continued driving, and went onto the freeway again and started going down towards Santa Barbara, just going along. And I was saying thank you to the other side and saying, thank you for the police officer's life. Thank you for the truck driver's life. If we would have hit that truck and exploded those gas tanks, we would have died and they would have died. And I'm so grateful to be here and be able to do the things that you ask me to do and help people and do kind things for everyone that I can find. Then that's what I do, and that's why I'm here. And when you're ready to take me home, which is, I don't think there's a heaven and a hell. I believe we come from home to grow our souls here on earth and to learn lessons, and then we go back home again. And I believe we're here many, many times, that we are planted here with lessons to learn in the same soul group. And one time you might be the mother, and the next time you might be the daughter, and the next time you might be the boss, and whoever it happens to be that you interact with. I think that we're here many times with those people. And so I was saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. And finally, about 10 minutes after we'd passed the truck, Victor finally said, he'd been completely quiet and silent. And he said, Barbara, how is it that you do that? How, if I'd not watched that whole thing unfold, he said, I would have never believed this story. How are you able to do that? And I said to him, Victor, it's not me. I have my door open. I have my heart open for the other side, and they know that I'll listen to them because I understand that they're real, but many people don't. And when you don't have your heart open and you don't understand that your intuition is actually the other side helping you to grasp something that's beyond you, then you don't have your door open. You can't learn from the situations, and you're not going to be as protected as you are if you do have that connection. So I said, it's them that helped us get through that whole situation. They didn't want the police officer to die. They didn't want the truck driver. They didn't want us to die. They made a change to that situation for us. And so he really, listens and appreciates and believes in this because he's watched it occur, and he's watched it right in front of him, and I've got lots of other stories that happened in my life. And the other side of the information that I have is that when I was 55 years old, I ended up going to one of the IANDS conferences, and there was a speaker. Her name is P.M.H. Atwater, and she's a researcher for near-death experiences. She's written a number of books. Check her out. And she was a speaker, and she was talking about the after effects that near-death experiencers have, and I was in the audience. So the one thing that was weird was, as she was talking about them, I was realizing that the after effects that she was talking about had been happening all the way back to my early childhood. So it wasn't just after my near-death experience at age 31. How could that be? Why would I have those after effects all the way back? So after I talked to her after her speech, she told me, you need to talk with your family because something may have happened to you back when you were a child that they didn't talk to you about, and you need to talk with your family. Well, my parents were deceased by then. I was 55, but I had an older brother who was 65 at the time, and I was going up to Oregon to see him and have dinner with him, and so I had to figure out a way, since I'd never told my family about my near-death experience that happened at age 31, I needed to figure out a way to ask him about something happening to me when I was a child, but not telling him about my near-death experience. So I said to him that I was doing a life review of my medical things that had happened to me and putting them in a little journal book in my purse so that if I ever got into a car accident or was at the hospital and they needed to know what my vaccinations had been or what my surgeries had been, that it would be right there in my purse. So my brother said that he would think about, when I asked him, was there anything when I was young that happened to me that I should know about? He said, I'll think about that. So after we had dinner together and enjoyed his wife and his daughter and my husband and I, and we were all having fun, and we were outside the restaurant and my husband was standing next to me, and my brother put his hand on my arm and said, "Barbie, there is something I do need to talk to you about." He said, "I always felt that I should talk to you, but, Mom and Dad said never to tell you what happened, never to talk to you about it. But," he said, "when you were 18 months old, you had a very high fever." He said, "I don't remember what you had, whether it was measles or some other disease." He said, "You were very, very sick." And he said, "You went into convulsions at our home in Salem." And he said, "You stopped breathing." So my dad was on the phone, got advice from the fire department to put me into the bathtub, have my mom put me into the bathtub in just neutral water, and then slowly add ice cubes to slowly lower my body temperature. Otherwise, I would go into shock. So my mom had me in the bathtub. She sent my brothers over to the neighbors' houses to get more ice because she only had like one tray back in 1958. And so my brother came back, my oldest brother came back first, and he handed the bag of ice to my mom, and he was standing in the doorway of the bathroom, and my mom was sobbing over the top of me and crying really hard. And my brother was watching the whole thing. And he said that my mom started adding the ice to the water and was crying. And he said, all of a sudden, I came back to life. And he said, what you did was you were completely, asleep, like, completely dead like this. And he said, you turned purple. So he said he knew that something was drastically wrong, no circulation of your blood. And he said, you went like that. And he said, you threw your head back and you took in a deep breath, and then you started crying and you turned from purple to red. And he said, then he knew that, that was much better because your circulation was happening again. So the ambulance people came in and took me off to the hospital, and I was in the hospital like 4 days. And my parents told my 3 siblings never to talk to me about it. So I ended up talking to my older sister about it, and she remembered the incident too. So it's not just my brother, it's my sister. And I probably had a near-death experience then. And I used to be a child that would, like, my parents didn't go to church or anything. They weren't religious. I would lay in bed at night and talk to God before I went to sleep. And my mom would come in and go, who are you talking to? And I'd say, I'm talking to God. And she'd go, she didn't know what to think about that. Many times the phone would ring and I would say, Mom, it's Grandma. She's calling about blah, blah, blah. And I would tell her what Grandma was calling about. She'd walk over to the phone, like looking at me, and then she'd pick up the phone and it would be Grandma, and she would be calling about the thing. But I'd said, I knew what was going to happen before it happened many, many times. And it freaked her out. She used to kind of say to me, where did you come from? Who are you? Where did you come from? So it was really kind of, I learned to hide it. I learned to disguise it. And when I got the messages, I usually kept quiet about it. And there were a couple times that I did open up, once in high school where I freaked everybody out because I knew what was going to happen. And, it was hard. I didn't know why. I was different. I didn't know. And I also had a very, very strong love for people. And my friends and my sister, my younger sister and my older, they'd be out, doing things with their friends. And I would walk down the street to the elderly couple's house. There were 3 of them in our neighborhood. And I would pick a flower and I would go down and sit with them and listen to the stories about their lives. I'd be 9 years old or 6 years old or 12 years old and be listening to their stories and be friends with them. Because it didn't matter to me about competition and being a sports person or, having friends and riding your bike around the neighborhood and throwing rocks at other kids. And those were all the things that they did. But
you definitely had one before, for sure. But I was going to ask earlier, because you said only 18% of people that had cardiac arrests have got an NDE.
Right.
But those are the ones that remember. Yeah. It's not to say they didn't have one. It's just that they maybe came back without the memory. And I think maybe because you recalled to the doctors or to the nurse, that it helped you remember it more vividly, almost like waking up from a dream.
Yes, exactly. And I think that, the after effects happen to the NDE whether or not they remember the near-death
Yeah,
experience.
because
The
that's irrelevant.
aspects are in their life, so
Yeah.
you may not know that you had one. And I've talked to a lot of people who have the after effects, and then like they'll email me, or some people call me and they'll say, I have to tell you this story. I went to my older sibling and I found out that I had a death experience when I was 3, or whatever. And they'll be like, unless I'd heard your near-death experience story, I would have never even asked my sister. I didn't know, but I had the same kind of things as you did. And so it's really
so interesting,
amazing how many people out there that have had the same thing. And I feel, really good about talking about it and helping people to connect to it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I heard a lot of people that go back to an abusive relationship often don't make it. Like, it's always worse the second time.
Right. That's when he ended up hurting my back and rupturing the disc in my back. I mean, he would be so abusive, and he was being abusive to my 8-year-old son. At the time, my son had grown up, with him for a number of years by that time, and he had started hurting my son too. So he didn't end up physically like hurting him, like damaging him in any way, but my son was struggling with, what was happening in our lives. And, to marry someone after that whole thing and trust someone again, the way that I did that is pretty special. I was afraid when I got rid of the bad guy. I didn't want to date anybody. I wanted nobody in my life but my children. And I did that for a whole year. And people would ask me out at work and etc. I never was a bar person, so I never, but at the children's after school things or something, some guy would get in it. Oh, would you like to go out for coffee? No. So what ended up happening after about a year, and I'd been asked a few times, I thought, if I ever choose to go out with anyone again, I want to make sure they're the right person. So I started a little booklet that I kept next to my bed, and I started writing character traits in the booklet. So I'd write kindness, empathy, patience, compassion, the things that I wanted in someone rather than what I'd had with the previous guy. So I never put any negative. I always, if I thought of a negative, I switched it around and only put a positive down. And when I would work on that would be before I went to bed at night, after the kids were asleep. And so I would then shut the book and I would say, God, I don't know who this person is that I'm writing about, but I know that you do. And if you could bring him to me in a safe way so that I can check to make sure that he's these character traits, and in the right timing for his life and for my life, then I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Good night. So I did that for a whole year. By the time the year had happened, I had 116 things on this list, and, looked at it pretty much every night and said that prayer. So one day my son comes into my apartment and says, Mom, this is Erin, and she lives around the corner, and she's my friend over at the junior high school. He was in 8th grade and she was in 7th grade. And he said, we want to go see a movie together. Will you take us? So after I agreed to take them to the movie, then they said, well, can you come over to her house and pick us up? She just lives right around the corner. And so I said, okay, I'm going to change my clothes and I'll come over and pick you up. So 15 minutes later, I knocked on the front door, and this 7-foot tall, 2 meters, 13 centimeter guy opens the front door. And I said, I'm here to take your daughter and my son to the movie. And he said, well, they asked me to take them to the movie. And I knew exactly what my son was doing to me. And I was like, oh my God. So I said, well, go ahead. You can take them to the movie. And then both the kids came out from around the corner. They'd been listening, and they said, no, you have to go too. So I was like, oh, I can't believe they're doing this. So they made us sit next to each other at the movie. And then we went out for pizza with the kids afterwards. And we picked up his other son. My daughter was seeing her father out, close by at his house. So she had visitation with him that night. And so we took 3 of our kids over to the pizza parlor, and
Brilliant.
we talked and chatted, and 6 months to the day we married, and it's now been almost 32 years. And I can tell you, the person I married was exactly the person that I put down on that list.
All 116.
All 16. So kindness, never raised his voice, never mad at me or the children, always patient, always supportive, believed my near-death experience story enough to allow me to start the IANDS group in Santa Barbara, attends every one of my meetings, goes to every conference with me. Everyone knows him. What a nice guy. Yeah. And
That is amazing. Wow.
Yeah. So if I want to tell your people to do that, whether it's a job they're looking for, whether it's a loved one that they need to add to their life, tell them to use that experience with writing those things down and asking for help with, having that occur, because that is real. It happened. And I can't, suggest it strong enough. It is an amazing thing when you see that you've just got done writing all these things down and you get delivered that person or that job or that place to live or whatever they're looking for. It's really beautiful. So yeah, do it.
I mean, you hear a lot of, is it Neville Goddard that said that as well? Say it before you go to sleep when you're in that theta brainwave state and you're able to manifest whatever, but you need to know what it looks like.
Exactly.
You can't ask for something if you don't know what that is.
Exactly what I tell people, because if you haven't got an idea in your head what you're looking for, how can they get it for you? They don't know what you want. So you need to be specific. And I was very specific.
Yes. And you need to ask.
Yes, you need to ask. Yes, you need to definitely ask. And, be aware that it might not be right away. And it might not be exactly what you're asking for, because maybe, if you're asking for a job with these characteristics, maybe that job exists, but maybe there's someone that's horrible, that's the supervisor over that job, that you would be tortured by. And so therefore that particular job might not come to you until perhaps later, because the job that's, close by and ready and available isn't where you want to be. So
yeah,
that's really important to understand as well. It's not your timing, it's their timing.
Yeah. So ask for what you want, but don't hold on to what it should look like or how it manifests.
Exactly.
Just going back, your first, I mean, you were very young, so you wouldn't remember, but I heard that if a mother prays for her child, that they will bring the child back or something like that. Like, it's a mother's prayer that always gets answered.
Wow, that's beautiful. I hadn't heard that. And in my life, that bad husband, when I got pregnant with my baby daughter, he didn't want the baby. So he was very angry with me that I had gotten pregnant. And it was, I didn't try. It just happened.
It had nothing to do with him, right?
It was his baby, but
you had a child without his, he had no part in it.
He didn't want it.
Sad.
He didn't want it to happen. So he ended up trying to cause me to have a miscarriage in the 6th month of the pregnancy. So I ended up having to go to the hospital because he had ruptured the placenta and I had leaking fluid coming out, and they had told me that I probably would have to have, an abortion because the baby wouldn't survive. And I was praying very, very big at that time, huge prayer saying, God, please, this is my little redheaded baby that I've really wanted for my whole life. I always wanted to have a redheaded daughter. And I said, please let me have this little baby girl for my life, please. And it didn't matter to me if he didn't want her. I wanted her very badly. And I knew she was coming. Actually, when I got pregnant, I knew she was the little redheaded baby daughter. And so, it ended up that I ended up delivering on my due date, and she was a little redheaded daughter, and she's 37 years old now. And she doesn't have much to do with her dad. So she recognizes who he is. And, it was sad for her to have that person, in her life. But luckily, she got the really good guy, my husband, as her daddy. When she was 5, I married my husband that I'm married to now. So she's had him as her daddy, along with all the other kids, since she was 5 years old. So.
Yeah, that's hard for a child if her father actually didn't want her from the get-go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is that inner conflict, Mother wants you, father doesn't.
Yeah. And he tried to, make it so that she wasn't born. So pretty sad stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So from a higher soul level, I mean, they say that your abuser is your teacher. In some, somebody will have to sign up to say, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Like, do you think you chose that? Not here, but on the other side as a potential for you to grow?
It definitely could be, because if I hadn't gone through all that and had the near-death experience, I wouldn't be talking about this and teaching people all over the world about what the aspects are of having had a near-death experience and helping them grow spiritually. I wouldn't be here. So I guess that I signed up for it. And I don't hold any negative grudges against my ex-husband. I have seen him a number of times and always treat him kindly. I don't be mean or anything.
You don't need to.
No, don't need to.
I say you judge yourself in the end. When you go to the other side, you've got yourself to reckon with.
Yes. Yeah. And, we all have that. So try to find all the ways that you can, I really enjoy just finding ways to help people. And, one of the things that Santa Barbara has is a lot of homeless people. Because it's a wealthy area, people will come from other areas to live here because they think that they can be cared for better by an area that's wealthy. So, many people will just look right past a homeless person, but I don't. And I always keep $5, $10, $20 in my wallet in a little place where I can pull it out quickly. And I will walk up to them and I will say, I hope this buys you a nice meal. And 90% of the time, my husband is usually with me, so he's standing behind me. And we figured out that 90% of the time when I do that, not only are they happy that I recognized them and I looked in their eyes and I saw them, but also they say, God bless you. And, that to me is God speaking directly to me through them, because I feel that it's not my job to judge what they're going to do with that money that I give them or whatever they're going to do with other people's money. It may be they need alcohol. Maybe they need that badly. They got themselves into a situation that they can't get themselves out of at the time. So I don't worry about what they do. I just worry that I hope and I pray for them that they, are going to be okay in the future. And I give them whatever I can. And I feel that that's doing what I'm supposed to do. So I wish everybody would do that. If we all, cared and were concerned about the other people out there in the world as much as we are about our families, perhaps, then, the world would be a better place. And
absolutely. Yeah, I think it's like in the Matrix, the people that took the red pill, once you've woken up, you can't go back. You've seen a brighter future. You've seen what's possible. But there are people that want the blue pill. They just don't want to see what's going on. They don't want to know. And if someone does tell them, it's safer for them. For whatever reason, I don't understand it. But for whatever reason, they just want to continue along that.
Yeah, I don't understand that either at all. I don't get it. Why you would see your behaviors as wrong, bad, abusive, etc., and you wouldn't be able to change yourself. You know, you wouldn't choose to be somebody different. That's really hard. And
I have a hard time. I was helping a guy out. He's cleaning his place, but he broke his ribs from coughing.
oh,
And now they've put, he's got 4 broken ribs, and they've put these steel rods in his ribs to mend. But because he moves around, obviously there's constant movements, and his rib cage is expanding every time he breathes. So 2 of them have come off. So they now need to operate again. Either that, or they have to tie him to a bed and have this bed turning him for 3 months. So I said to him, but surely, he said, I don't know what else to do. I said, well, wouldn't it help if you stopped smoking? Because he's smoking all day long. And he said, no, I can't stop. And I thought, well, you know, it's, to me, like, maybe that's not the only thing, but that would be a good place to start. And some people just cannot see that.
absolutely. And they can't change themselves. Excuse me. It's really sad to watch that occur in people. Yeah. My voice is like,
You've spoken a lot.
I don't smoke.
Yeah, no. Maybe you're picking up on his cigarette smoke in your lungs. And I think there was some hash or something in there as well, which is the justification for smoking. And I think, well, okay.
Exactly.
We are in Holland, so.
Yeah, my husband saw a lot of smoking in Holland as well, and my mom actually smoked, and so did my stepfather. And so when I was young, in my early teens, I watched that behavior along with drinking alcohol, and I thought, you know, I have choices in my life, and if I start something, it's going to be hard to stop it. So I think that what I'll do is never start. So that's what I made in my choices in my life, was that I'm never going to do it. So I'll never have to fight to stop it. So that was a good decision for me. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I wish everybody would make that decision, you know, on the bad stuff in life. Just say, if I never start, I'll never have to stop. But the world is, and that stuff is there. So.
Well, maybe that's part of their journey to experience it, to grow through it, to get whatever, to get sick so they can heal from it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Who knows? Well, thank you so much for sharing. That was very enlightening. And thanks for sharing all about the NDE as well. I think a lot of people will benefit from that. And I think the IANDS website has got a ton of case studies and that as well that people can read through.
And also the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation is run by Dr. Jeffrey Long and his wife Jody Long, and that's NDERF.org. And that has about more than 5,000 people who have written in, and he actually sends them a list of questions because he does research on it, so everyone gets the same questions, and then all the answers are there too, so you can compare. It's amazing, and he's done an amazing job with this. He's a physical doctor in the United States. He's a let's see, I forgot what type of doctor he is. I can't think of the type that he is, but he's an amazing man, and I'm good friends with them too. So check that out as well. And all the YouTube videos that are out there, especially there's a French man that does a lot of YouTube videos named Anthony Chen, Chene, and he's interviewed lots of the near-death experiencers over here in the United States because I give him their names and contact information, and he's come over here on his own dime and he's interviewed them, and he's now done a movie compiling all of those interviews.
I heard about that movie. Yes.
Yeah.
There's about 70 or something people in there.
And he's an amazing young man. I kind of adopted him. I like to adopt people. And so he and his girlfriend are my extra kids over in the south of France, and I love them dearly. Yeah. So check that out. That's awesome.
That's coming out in the beginning of next year, right?
I think so, yes. There's a movie out by Angel Studios called After Death, And I'm just briefly in that. They use the NBC Today Show interview, and they just use like 10 seconds of it. There's lots of people in that one. But Anthony Cheen's documentary movie is going to be called Renaissance. Renaissance. And so that, when it comes out, wow, that's going to be the awesome one. Yeah.
Looking forward to that. Yeah, awesome. So where can people get hold of you?
So you can email me at Sunny, like sunshine. So SUNNY, S for Santa, B for Barbara. So that's my location where I live. Sunny SB Barbara. So there's 2 B's in a row, and my name is BARBARA, and it's at gmail.com. And that's the best way to reach me. And then if we want to connect via phone or Zoom or FaceTime or something, then we can set that up.
Lovely. I'll post that in the description as well. Yeah.
Thanks.
Barbara, do you have a last message for our audience before we go?
Yes. Use your time in your life to not only make yourself happy, not only support your family, your friends, but to go beyond that. Because every time you touch someone else out there in a positive way, you're going to see that at the end of your life, and you're going to be proud that you touched those lives that you make a difference in, even small ways. It can even be opening a door, or it can be giving a homeless person something, shelter, or coat, or food, or money. Anything that you can do to help the world be a better place, then you're going to be proud of that at the end of your life. So achieve those things on a daily basis. Don't look towards being egotistical, judgmental, and the negatives that are out there. Choose instead all those positives. There you go.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And yeah, based on all the stories I've heard of life reviews, definitely do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It was lovely meeting you finally. And
Beautiful. Natasha, thank you.